Hello everybody, and I'm live. So today we're going to talk about veganism and can I support my mental and hormonal health as a vegan? This is from a blog post that I wrote in September that I'm going to read to you guys and we can have a discussion afterwards. So thank you for joining me. My name is Dr. Talia Marcheggiani. I'm a naturopathic doctor with a focus in mental health and hormones. I received this email from somebody online, and she wrote to me and said, "Dear Dr. Talia, I've been vegan for 6 years. I also suffer from mental health conditions and possible hormonal imbalances. After doing some research on diets for anxiety and depression, I found that most of them include meat and animal products. I'm wondering, can my vegan diet be harming my mental health? I'm primarily a vegan for ethical reasons, and I'd hate to have to harm animals unless you think it's absolutely necessary for promoting my mental health and wellness." And seeing many vegans in my practice and vegetarians, I thought that'd be useful to compile a big article about the issue of can vegans support their mental health and hormones. So I write back, so nutrition, especially where it pertains to more emotionally charged topics like human health, the environment, or animal welfare, is surprisingly controversial. I know that broaching this subject is a bit like walking into a lion's den, and for the record, lions are not vegans. Therefore, let me preface this conversation with a few disclaimers. So in writing about veganism and mental health, I'm not looking to get into a debate, and in posting this video, I'm not looking to get into a war or a debate. I'm writing to provide information for those who are wondering if it's possible to heal mental health and hormonal conditions, including women's health conditions, thyroid conditions, and adrenal conditions, while following an entirely plant-based diet. So not including any animal products or meat. If you feel that you might be triggered by this information and are not willing to approach this essay with an open mind, then this video is probably not for you, and I suggest you stop watching. If you're open, however, then continue to watch, and I look forward to hearing any questions that you might have or any comments. And I also want to point out that I fully understand and sympathize with the ethical arguments for veganism. In my 20s, I was vegetarian for 5 years, and for one of those years, I was a vegan. And contrary to what some diehard vegan fans have suggested and criticized me with, I did follow the diet right by eating whole foods, balancing my micronutrients and macronutrients as best I could, and striving to eat enough. I eventually had to stop, and it was not because I missed the taste of meat. While following a vegetarian diet, I took comfort in the fact that no animal had to die for me to survive, that I knew of. I love the taste of plant-based foods, and I still do, and the ease of preparing them. I was satisfied knowing that my diet was having minimal impact on the environment. Again, so I thought. I also, this is an aside, but I also enjoyed bathing in the feelings of moral superiority that this diet earned me. However, that's kind of besides the point. And around this time, I read a book called The Ethics of What We Eat by a man called Peter Singer, and that still remains the single most thought-provoking book on human nutrition that I've read to this day. And I've read many books on human nutrition since then and even before that. I in no way advocate for factory farming practices, and I urge everybody, all omnivores, to consume the most ethically sourced meat, fish, eggs, and dairy that you can afford and that's available to you. And obviously, not only is sustainable animal farming better for animal welfare and for the environment, it's also better for our health. I don't push for any single one-size-fits-all diet. So I'm not trying to advocate that my way is better, that there's a diet that everyone should follow. I believe that an individual determines his or her perfect diet through experience, and I carefully approach conversations about diet with my patients to avoid shaming their eating habits and pressuring them into a diet that they feel uncomfortable with. If vegans and vegetarians come into my practice, and you're more than welcome as a vegan or vegetarian to see me as a doctor, we're going to work with where you're at, and I will respect your food choices, of course. That being said, however, it's my duty as a doctor to provide my patients with all the information they need to make empowered choices, and I do this by drawing on the 15 years I've spent studying nutrition through formal education, personal experience, and clinical experience. It may certainly be possible to survive and perhaps even thrive, depending on your genetics, on a vegan and vegetarian diet. And there are certainly examples of people that do this, but there are major limitations to this diet that we need to face if we're committed to supporting optimal mental and emotional health. And I believe that everyone should understand the risks. And so the intention of this video is to outline some of those limitations. And they're, in my opinion, pretty severe limitations. The first thing I'm going to start talking about is protein. So protein quality and quantity. Protein makes up 16% of the human body. 62% of our body is water, just for reference. Most of the solid of our body is protein. Protein is required for our body structure. Our bones, our muscles, our connective tissues, our skin, and our hair. All of that is protein. So you're looking at everything you're seeing in my screen is me, protein, and I'm filled with water. Amino acids, which make up protein, comprise the hormones and neurotransmitters that regulate our mood and gene signaling. So for example, tryptophan is an amino acid. It's used to make serotonin and melatonin, two hormones that enable us to regulate our feelings of well-being and our circadian rhythms, respectively. Cysteine is another amino acid used to make glutathione, which is the main antioxidant of the body that neutralizes cancer-causing free radicals, prevents damage to our DNA, and protects us from the incessant chemical onslaught of our increasingly toxic lives. Some of these free radicals are actually just produced by our body as a result of normal metabolism. Glycine and GABA are two other amino acids, and they calm the nervous system. They prevent overactivation of our brain's fear centers, and they soothe anxiety. Glutamate, from glutamine, stimulates the nervous system, fuels our gut and kidney cells, and allows us to absorb the nutrients from our food and filter waste from our bodies. The human body is essentially a protein sack filled with water that hums with a metabolic activity orchestrated by tens of thousands of enzymes, and all of our enzymes are also protein. When it comes to dietary proteins, not all are created equal. So foods that claim the title complete proteins boost all 9 essential amino acids. Essential amino acids are not synthesized by the body and must be obtained exclusively from diet. Many vegetarian sources of protein are not complete proteins, and therefore protein combining must be practiced to avoid deficiency in certain amino acids, tryptophan being an example. This is very common for vegans and vegetarians to have low levels of tryptophan and therefore are unable to make serotonin or melatonin. You can infer how this might affect your mental health. The most common drugs for anxiety and depression are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which are thought to increase levels of serotonin in the brain. Proteins also differ in their absorbability. Some vegan foods rich in protein contain anti-nutrients or fibers that make them difficult to digest. So there's a reference in the original article that you can look at that shows the quality of different protein sources and their absorbability. So for example, the protein digestibility of whey, which is from dairy, or egg, is 100%. Meaning that 100% of the protein from these foods is absorbed in a healthy digestive tract. In contrast, only 75% of the protein in black beans is absorbed. And even more dismally, those who hope to get a significant source of their protein from something like peanut butter on their morning toast are only absorbing 52% of it. The recommended daily allowance, or RDA, for protein is 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight for the average person. However, when it comes to supporting optimal health, the RDAs of important nutrients are set notoriously low, and in my opinion, even higher nutrients are required for those with chronic health conditions such as mental health issues, chronic stress, hormone imbalances, obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancer, and autoimmune diseases, to name a few. So for my patients, I tend to recommend between 1 to 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. And for those who are particularly active, who need to lose weight and who are obtaining their protein from lower absorbable sources, I may even recommend higher amounts. For women with conditions like PCOS, depression, and anxiety, I often recommend at least 30 grams of protein per meal, especially at breakfast, to balance blood sugar, fuel neurotransmitter synthesis, sustain energy throughout the day, and promote optimal adrenal function and stress hormone signaling. I believe that the RDA for protein to prevent muscle wasting is set far too low. And should our standard really be to prevent muscle wasting? Don't we want to thrive as opposed to just, survive? And this is especially true if protein sources are difficult to digest and of lower qualities. You may need to aim higher if your protein sources are from plant sources. But what about the claims that high protein diets can be detrimental to our health, especially our kidney health? So a 1-year crossover study, which means that they put people on a certain diet and then they took them off and put them in the control groups, they crossed them to the opposite group, showed that active men who consume very high amounts of protein, so this is over 3 grams per kilogram of body weight, suffered no ill effects, and that was after a year. So very, very high protein diet. If you have healthy kidneys, probably not something to worry about. Getting adequate protein is difficult on a vegan diet, but not impossible. Tracking your macronutrients and considering supplementing with a high-quality protein powder may be required. Understanding exactly how much protein your diet delivers, though, is essential. So for instance, while quinoa is a complete protein containing all 9 essential amino acids, it only contains 8 grams of protein per cup. 1 cup of black beans contains 39 grams of protein, but only 29 grams are absorbed, and black beans are not a complete protein, so you would have to balance the black beans with other protein sources. Furthermore, for conditions like PCOS that require managing carbohydrate intake, getting the protein without the additional carbohydrates can be a challenge. Legumes typically contain a 3-to-1 ratio of carbs to protein. Om Prakash, hello, Om Prakash. So 1 cup of black beans contains 116 grams of carbohydrates. So to get those 29 grams of absorbable protein from a cup of black beans, which are not complete protein, and 29 grams is roughly like a 4-ounce piece of chicken breast, you're going to be also getting 116 grams of carbohydrates. This one serving alone is going to deliver that. And this is often too high for the many women suffering from the mental health and hormonal issues that I treat in my practice, who often feel best when keeping their dietary carbohydrate intake well under 150 grams a day. For reference, my net carbohydrate intake personally is about 60-70 grams a day. And so anyone suffering from insulin resistance, that's probably too high a carb amount. Autoimmunity. So chronic inflammation runs rampant in the bodies of many of my patients. More research is coming out showing that inflammation is at the root of most chronic health complaints, such as mental health conditions like depression and bipolar disorder, and hormonal conditions like PCOS and endometriosis. Cardiovascular disease and diabetes are recently thought to begin as autoimmune diseases spurred on by chronic inflammation and activation of the immune system. To manage conditions of autoimmunity and chronic inflammation, it's often appropriate to follow an anti-inflammatory diet that is low in allergenic potential. For patients with hormonal issues, autoimmunity, gut issues, and mental health conditions, which research shows are inflammatory conditions at their root, reducing the diet down to leafy green vegetables, chicken, fish, and beef can aid in lowering inflammation, healing the gut, and restoring immune function. And after a time, so maybe 1 to 3 months of doing a diet such as this anti-inflammatory diet, foods are slowly reintroduced to find out what the body can tolerate. Grains and legumes contain anti-nutrients like lectins and phytates that protect plants from being ingested and destroyed. Along with other common allergenic foods like dairy and eggs, grains and legumes, with their anti-nutrient content, have a high potential for irritating the digestive tract, causing gastrointestinal inflammation and immune system activation, leading to chronic inflammation that permeates the entire body. And obviously this is in susceptible individuals, but when we're talking about supporting mental health and hormone imbalances, we're talking about people that are suffering from these concerns and potentially have higher levels of autoimmunity in their body or inflammation in their bodies. The higher protein content in legumes like peas, black beans, lentils, and soy, and grains like wheat and corn make these foods staples in plant-based diets. Therefore, even attempting an anti-inflammatory elimination diet as a vegan is virtually impossible. Vegetarian diets are hardly better, as vegetarians often rely on dairy and eggs to balance their diet, both of which are common food sensitivities that can trigger autoimmunity and inflammation. On vegan studies. So, doesn't following a plant-based diet confer amazing health benefits though? So while many studies of vegan and vegetarian diets show benefit for improving markers of various metabolic conditions like diabetes and cardiovascular disease, it's important to keep in mind that many of these publications are comparing a diet rich in whole grains, vegetables, fruit, nuts, and seeds with the standard American diet, with its grain-fed, hormone-pumped animal byproducts, deep-fried, and rancid corn oil. To better paint the picture, coffee is the #1 source of dietary antioxidants in the United States, revealing that virtually no one in North America is eating fresh fruits and vegetables. Therefore, it makes sense that adding a few servings of micronutrient-containing fruits and vegetables to your daily nutritional intake will radically alter your health status. When I first began my foray into the world of plant-based living, I also felt amazing. After a few months, though, the health benefits slowly faltered and I started to suffer negative health consequences. So I suffered from weight gain and fatigue, depression, hypothyroidism, IBS, and various nutrient deficiencies such as iron deficiency. My health improved when I added some animal products to my vegetarian diet and removed dairy, grains, and legumes. However, my experience is a mere anecdote. But to my knowledge, there hasn't been a study comparing a whole foods-based diet that includes ethically sourced animal products with a whole foods vegan diet. And I'd be very interested in seeing such a study if it's ever conducted. So keep in mind that it may not be the meat that was the problem in the standard American diet. So for example, a McDonald's meal really only contains about 2 to 3 grams of meat, and the rest of it is refined carbohydrates and trans fats and high fructose corn syrup. Individual variability. So Rich Roll, a vegan super athlete who you may have heard of if you're interested in vegan, vegetarian, plant-based diets, is often dredged up as an example of how the human body can thrive on a plant-based diet. However, more than his diet, Rich's individual genetics may have more to do with his success as an athlete and obviously his training. Also, the fact that he is an endurance athlete requiring higher amounts of carbohydrates, he might thrive in a diet where all of the protein sources come with a 3-to-1 or more ratio of carbs to protein. Even after 8 years of returning to omnivorous living with occasional iron and desiccated liver supplementation, my ferritin level, which is a measure of iron status, still hovers around 40. And I would say 80 is considered optimal, but at least, 40 is still pretty good. However, this is with supplementation and eating meat. So this is something that a doctor called Kelly Brogan talks about, and she talks about something called parasympathetic dominance, which reflects my personal constitution. Parasympathetic dominance means that you swing more to the rest and digest side of the nervous system, as opposed to the fight or flight. So this means that I look at a piece of toast and gain 10 pounds. I tend to suffer from congestive lymphatic conditions and a sluggish metabolism. I tend to have low energy unless I constantly stoke my metabolic furnace. And when stressed, I tend to gain weight rather than lose it and slip into a depression that's marked more by lethargy. If I'm not taking care of myself, I get migraine headaches and I suffer from hormonal imbalances. And like other parasympathetic DOMs, I tend to have a higher requirement for dietary iron and crave red meat and leafy green vegetables. I also seem to do better with a diet that's higher in protein and healthy fats rather than carbohydrates. And so many of the people I work with fit this profile as well. My patients are highly creative and intuitive, and they also suffer from mental health and hormonal conditions and are very susceptible to stress. I find that most do better through moderating their carbohydrate intake, ensuring high micronutrient healthy fat consumption, and eating more protein, particularly from some red meat. And this, is difficult because when we're told that we should feel better avoiding red meat, this becomes a little bit of a war, even when we know intuitively that that's better for our bodies. New research into MTHFR genes, so that's the methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase genes, reveals that certain diets may have more health benefits for certain individuals. About 40 to 60% of North Americans are unable to convert folic acid, which is a synthetic nutrient added to multivitamins and fortified grains, into methylfolate, which is used for a chemical process in our bodies called methylation. Methylation pathways are involved in the fight or flight response, the production and recycling of glutathione, the body's master antioxidant, the detoxification of hormones, chemicals, and heavy metals through the liver, genetic expression and DNA repair, neurotransmitter synthesis, cellular energy production, the repair of cells damaged by free radicals, balancing inflammation through the immune response, controlling T cell, which are immune cell production, and fighting infections, to name a few. So methylation reactions are involved in very different bodily processes that are essential to survival and to thriving. Individuals with impaired MTHFR function often suffer from autoimmune conditions and mental health conditions such as depression. They tend to feel better when avoiding grains that contain folic acid, which is not easily converted to folate, which is what's used in methylation, and eating green leafy vegetables that actually do contain the active form of folate. However, they do require higher amounts of protein in their diets. They require higher amounts of vitamin B12, which is also important for methylation, and choline, which is a nutrient that's found in eggs and liver, which helps bypass methylfolate pathways, working as an alternative methyl donor to help support those methylation pathways. Choline is also necessary for estrogen metabolism and for making a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, which helps with concentration, memory, and focus. And also with our migrating motor complex to help with digestion. Nutrient deficiencies. So, you thought I would probably start with this, right? Because everybody that criticizes or brings up concerns with a vegan, vegetarian, or plant-based diet often brings up the nutrient deficiencies, especially B12. So I bet you were wondering when this would come up, and so I left this actually for last, because it's not the biggest of my concerns. It's simply something you can supplement with. But we have to ask ourselves, is the ideal human diet one that requires supplementation to meet your essential nutrients? So the first one is B12. So of course, it's no secret that the vegan diet is essentially devoid of vitamin B12, an important nutrient for detoxification, methylation, neurotransmitter synthesis, and energy metabolism. Animal sources are the only sources of B12. Our gut bacteria can make B12, but how much is absorbed in the colon, which is where our gut bacteria are, and not where we absorb nutrients like B12, for the body's use is not clear. We absorb our B12 in our small intestine, not in our colon. B12 deficiency is serious. A friend of mine, and this is real, because I know this sounds like a myth, suffered permanent neurological damage leading to seizures and almost death from B12 deficiency. This was a vegan. The neurological damage caused by B12 deficiency is irreversible, and I've had patients who experience some improvement with restoring B12 levels, but it can take some time and the progress is not always linear. B12 deficiency can have serious neuropsychiatric symptoms that mimic severe bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, and there's a case study on this that I linked to in the article, and that resolve once B12 injections are given. And horrific case reports tell stories of B12 deficient patients treated with rounds of electroshock therapy for their treatment-resistant psychosis before the true cause of their symptoms, which was a B12 deficiency, was uncovered. The blood reference ranges for B12 is roughly 130 to 500 picomoles per liter, and this is in North America. But I find that people don't feel their best until their levels are over 600. And many experience severe B12 deficiency symptoms under 300 picomoles per liter. The Japanese reference ranges start at 500. This means that if your doctor tells you that your blood levels are normal, quote unquote, your body could still be operating at a suboptimal level of B12. For vegans, supplementing with a good absorbable form of B12 is non-negotiable. So this is something that is essential at minimum. B12 from vegetarian sources such as dairy products is damaged in the pasteurization process, and therefore supplementation may still be required even if you are theoretically getting B12 from dairy and eggs. Other nutrients. So B12 aside, other nutrients that are commonly deficient in vegan diets are iron, zinc, iodine, EPA, and DHA, the marine fatty acids, choline, vitamin A, and vitamin D, to name a few. Zinc is essential for immune function, skin health, neurogenesis, which is making new brain cells, memory and cognition, gut integrity, neurotransmitter synthesis, and hormonal health, among other essential functions. Tam Gann, hi. Hello, Tam. Iodine is required for thyroid and ovarian function. It's also important for estrogen detoxification and estrogen signaling. Iron is important for supplementing tissues with oxygen, optimal thyroid function, and fertility. And menstruating women are commonly operating at a suboptimal level of iron, resulting in fatigue, dry skin, chronic infections, heavy periods, and even anxiety. Vitamin D is responsible for regulating almost 1,000 different genes in the body. It's actually a hormone rather than a vitamin. Supplementing with D3 is required for the 70 to 90% of North Americans who are deficient. And sadly, vitamin D3 supplements are all animal sourced, obtained from the lanolin in sheep's wool. So if you're vegan and you're also using vegan supplements, then you're not probably going to be obtaining the active form of supplemental vitamin D. D2 from plant sources, from mushrooms, is a vegan form of vitamin D, and likely not as effective as animal-derived D3 for raising D blood levels. Vegans are 75% more deficient than omnivores in vitamin D, which is alarming considering how deficient most North Americans are. That's 1,000 vegan genes that aren't being properly regulated. EPA and DHA, omega-3 fatty acids found in fish and algae, are essential for cell membranes and brain function. And while DHA can be made from ALA, which is found in flax and walnuts and other nuts and seeds and plant sources, many of us are not efficient at converting it. So even the best converters among us, so genetically the best people that can take their ALA and make it into DHA, only synthesize about 18% of our ALA into DHA. And furthermore, the conversion of ALA to DHA requires zinc and iron, which are two nutrients that are typically deficient in vegan diets, which I just mentioned. So if you're deficient in those, you're probably not a good converter anyways. Vegans and vegetarians have lower levels of EPA and DHA than meat eaters, and this is confirmed in research. Even for omnivorous patients with mental health conditions, supplementation with EPA is often required for therapeutic benefit. And vegan supplements of algae-derived EPA and DHA do exist. However, many of the studies that show benefit for fish oil supplementation in depression, bipolar, and OCD require that the EPA to DHA ratio be 3:1 or higher, so higher EPA. EPA is the anti-inflammatory of the two. So this high EPA to DHA ratio is not available in algae source supplements that I've seen, making it almost impossible to derive enough EPA from vegan sources. That being said, it is possible to supplement with iron bisglycinate, iodine, zinc picolinate, vitamin A, inject methylcobalamin weekly, chug algae oil by the jugful, and drip vitamin D 2 drops on your tongue and hope for the best. You can pray to the methylation gods that your MTHFR genes are all operating at top speed so that your body doesn't need to depend on protein and choline-dependent pathways for its liver function and DNA repair. You can dump Vega protein powder into your smoothies and hope that you don't have a sensitivity to grains and legumes, because vegan protein powders usually contain some combo of rice, soy, and pea. And you can obsessively track your macro and micronutrients on something like Chronometer to make sure that you're getting enough of everything. And you might be okay. There are a few people, the rich rolls of the world, who will claim that they feel great in an entirely plant-based diet, and they do all of the above mentioned things and feel amazing. And I'm happy to hear it, honestly. However, I wonder how these genetically gifted individuals would fare if following a nutritionally complete whole foods, omnivorous diet that contains grass-fed chicken, fish, meat, gelatin, eggs, and perhaps even dairy, in addition to a variety of plant foods. If just one important nutrient pathway that depends on iodine, zinc, vitamin D, iron, B12, EPA, and DHA is working suboptimally, if you're suffering from a hormonal condition, a mental health condition, an autoimmune disease, or a digestive issue, then it's possible that if you follow a vegan or vegetarian diet, you'll never feel as well as you're meant to. And there's a quote from a friend of mine who was a vegan turned omnivore who said, when disclosing why she decided to start eating meat again, "I still love the environment and animals, of course, but I just love myself more." Something to consider. And I want to read to you guys a comment that was left at the bottom of this article. So this person wrote, "I really like the way this topic was approached, but as a vegetarian, in brackets previously vegan, with an autoimmune disorder, I'm very unclear about how much meat you're suggesting. It still seems to me that the American diet of meat with every meal is unnecessary and too much. So is a couple times a week sufficient? And how much of that portion should be fish versus red meat versus poultry?" All right, so I wrote, "Thank you for your thoughtful comments. Your question is a good one, however, and there isn't a straightforward answer to this." And this is a common question I get, which is why I'm reading it. "As a naturopathic doctor, I believe that diet can heal autoimmune disease and that there is a good, great, and optimal diet for everyone. Working one-on-one with an expert who can guide you in that area might be a good idea to help you feel your best." And this goes for everyone if you're curious about this. And that being said, when it comes to meat, it's not easy to say how much is needed. In responding, I had looked it up and saw that the average North American eats about 120 kilograms of meat a year, which works out to about 300 grams a day of meat. So essentially that would be 2 chicken breasts, or a chicken breast and a small 3-ounce steak or salmon fillet a day. And this is pretty much what I eat. Maybe I eat 2 servings of animal products a day, of fish, meat, chicken. And also protein powders. I eat plant-based sources of protein as well. Some days more, some days less, but it's usually 1 to 2 servings of meat, chicken, and fish a day, plus gelatin or eggs. Meat is my main protein source, as I don't do well with grains and legumes, more so with grains. So this might not be everyone's optimal amount. And it's also important to keep in mind that 40% of the food in North America is completely wasted, so tossed right into the trash, and therefore the estimates of how much our culture consumes is almost double what actually goes into our bodies, which is obviously a tragedy for sure. So if you're worried about the environment, then looking at minimizing food waste might have an even bigger impact. Because if you think about it, 40% of a cow is going into the garbage. We could prevent the death of 40% of cows if we just eat everything that we obtain or that we kill. But that's an aside. And so the answer is, how much meat should we eat a day? It depends on health goals and how much protein you need, how many calories you need, what foods you can tolerate, etc., as well as personal preference. And working one-on-one with someone who can help you sort that all out might be beneficial, especially if you have an autoimmune disease, and even more so since it seems like, and this is my response to the person asking the question, like you might be undergoing a dietary transition, which is never easy to navigate. And so I want to say too, like I love the idea of a plant-based diet, and I advocate plant-based diets, but plant-based diets that include some variation of red meat, fish, eggs, to get complete nutrient sources. And I encourage everybody to track their food for a week on an app like Chronometer, which looks at your micro and macronutrients, and also and to see if you're just getting your recommended daily amounts of all of the nutrients that your body needs to work. Also keeping in mind that a lot of the sources may not be fully absorbed and that these nutrients need each other to work. So if one is deficient, you may not be getting all the nutrients from something else. So thanks guys for watching. My name is Dr. Talia Marcheggiani, and this was a video about vegan and plant-based diets. Take care.